Hi, and thanks for joining me. I'm Susan from So Peaceful, and I enjoy dabbling in a variety of hand stitching techniques such as English paper piecing, applique, or embroidery. If you've met me at a craft fair, you'll know that I offer a choice of papers for English paper piecing, both reusable papers made from cardstock as well as fusible papers that semi-dissolve when they're in the wash. I have already done some videos using the cardstock, so today it's the fusible papers that we're going to do a video on. I have two class projects now. First one is lavender bag, which has a bag of beautiful Tasmanian lavender for you to pop in it, or a needlebook, and I did sell a few of these needlebook kits while we were in Sydney last weekend. So this video is an update of one that I've previously done to cover both projects, showing you how to use the fusible papers, and hopefully I'll share with you some of my tips and tricks for using them to make it just a little bit easier. So when you pick up one of our kits, you should find it laid out with the main pieces that you need for your English paper piece, centerpiece with the needlebook, for example. All the bits and pieces for the front are in the little pack. The rest of the fabric that's in there is the things that you will need to put the needlebook together. So what we've got here are the strips of fabric that will go on the back and make the inside pocket. We've got the felt, there's actually some purlin that will go in the middle, and then the linen for the inside pieces there as well. So, as well as some detailed instructions included in the kit. But the part that we'll need today to make up that hexagon flower and to put it on our background is in this little pack here. So whether you have the needlebook kit or the lavender bag kit, what you'll notice is that the fabric in there is silk-like. Now, if you've never used Liberty Tana lawn before, you won't be familiar with this. It is cotton, but it's much finer and, as I said, silk-like compared to the quilting cotton that you may be used to using. And that's the main reason, one of the main reasons, why I choose to pair it with the fusible papers. If we're using the reusable papers, for example, what we find when we, we'll get to this step a bit later, but when we fold the fabric over the card, it leaves enough of a gap on the edge for us to be able to put our needle through. Because this fabric is so fine, if I were to put this over normal cardstock paper like this, I wouldn't get that gap at the end on the outside edge to stitch through, because there's not enough space, doesn't leave enough of a gap. Now with our fusible papers, we're going to be stitching through them, and so that doesn't matter, and it's much easier to stitch, I find, with the fusible papers. So with your needlebook then, you're going to have 7 pieces of Liberty Lawn, and they'll make your flower in your centre. If you're doing the lavender bag, again, you'll have 7 pieces, because they're both same they are 7 pieces to make your hexagon flower. You'll also have 7 hexagon papers, and if you have a close look at them, you'll notice that there's a shiny side or a slippery side, and what I would call a flat or a matte side on the other side. Now, it's important that you know one side from the other. I do find it's easier for me to feel them by touch, to know which one's a slippery one and which one's a flat side. The slippery side, or the shiny side that you can see there, if you hold it in the right light, is actually the fusible side. So the fusible side of your paper will go on the wrong side of your fabric. So right side, wrong side, shiny side down on your fabric. Now you just need to position your paper, leaving yourself enough room that you can cut 1/4 inch around, 1/4 inch minimum. Doesn't matter if it's a little bit bigger, and it certainly doesn't matter if it's bigger on one side than the other, but we're looking for to be able to cut 1/4 inch all the way around it. So we'll just heat up the iron then, and we'll just press those papers onto the fabric. Once you've got them all positioned on your fabric, you're happy with where you've got them, and in most cases the piece of fabric I've given you is a little bit extra, a bit more than what you would actually need, so you could think about your placement of your papers if you're wanting to cover a particular area of the fabric. When your iron is warm, you just need to press each one of them for a few seconds. Don't use water because, as I mentioned earlier, paper is water soluble, so we don't want it to disappear until we've got them all stitched together. Now, if you're not altogether confident, just start with a corner. Make sure it's not going to pick up on the iron. If you do have it upside down, the paper upside down, and everybody has to do it at least once so they can tell others not to do it. Yeah, I've done it a few times. But, I do warn people in my classes, if you do have it upside down, it will stick to the iron. Please don't use your fingers to get it off because the iron is hot. I generally would, grab a pair of scissors, but if you've got a silicone tool or something, just to flick it off. But it will leave, if you've had the glue facing upwards, will leave the glue on the iron. Now, I just use a wet wipe to wipe that glue off, because if you leave the glue on the iron, as soon as you go to press it down again, of course, it's just going to pick the piece of paper back up with the glue on the iron. So you will need to get rid of it off the back of your iron. If you try too many times and you just don't know which way is up and it doesn't feel like it's got any glue left on it, I just use my glue pen, pop a bit of glue on it and then stick it back down. Be careful that it doesn't lose its shape. That's probably the most important thing, that it keeps its good shape. Nice crisp edges. So we'll just give them, as I said, they only take a few seconds and they're stuck down. And then turn that iron off. We won't need the iron again for quite a while, so you can turn that off and we'll put it away. But the next step then is to cut out your pieces, leaving 1/4 inch seam allowance. Now, when I watched that back, I could see that you couldn't actually see me cutting those, but here they are with the all cut, and you can see, they're certainly not identical, and that really doesn't matter. But I've got at least 1/4 inch, if not a little bit more, around them. So what we're going to do, and I'm assuming that you will be able to see this, I've got it in the right place, is now with our glue pen is to pop a little bit of glue just inside the edge of the paper, and then we're going to fold the fabric over. So you don't need a lot of glue. Fold and press, and then put a little bit of glue on your fabric and then fold the next side over. Now, because we're doing hexagons, each one of these fabric seam allowances, the outside edge, is going to get folded into the middle. So what I'm going to tell you about following in the same direction to glue is not quite so vital for your hexagons. But when you're doing shapes that have tails, like diamonds, for example, you're not going to be able to fold all your fabric into the center like that. And so it is really important that you're gluing in the same direction, whether it's clockwise or anti-clockwise, because those tails will nest together if you've glued in the same direction. So when we have a look then at our hexagon, what we're looking for is to have kept that nice shape with our straight lines and crisp corners. If you're not happy with it, if it's not positioned right, you can pick up your fabric and it doesn't dry too quickly, but just reposition it. Now, when I use the cardstock, the reusable papers, I would always glue with my papers on the table like that, just fold and press. With these, you do need to be a little bit more careful that you're not pushing the edge of the paper in when you're pushing that fabric over. Now, it's just a gentle press. You don't have to press it too hard, but we need to be careful that we're not pushing the paper, because it will lose its nice straight edge if we go pushing that paper too much. What I do, in particularly with small pieces, if I'm not too confident with not pushing it too hard, I find if I pick it up and do it in my fingers, between my thumb and my finger there, fold it over like that, I can feel the edge of that paper far more easily and know not to be too rough with it. Now, you'll find a system that works for you, and that's just a little tip. If you find you're having trouble keeping that paper from getting pushed in, then try picking it up so you can feel it between two fingers, and then you'll find it easier just to treat it a little bit more gently. So continue then to glue around all your 7 pieces, and we'll come back and start putting them together. Once you've got all your pieces glued, then lay them out as the way that you think that they look best. If they were to be a flower, generally I've given you at least one piece of fabric that will possibly be a good contrast with the rest, but you might choose to use a different one. You know, what looks good to you might be completely different to what I thought might look good. So just lay them out, you know, until you're happy with them. At that point, I would probably take a photo, because once I start stitching them together, I tend not to remember the order that I initially laid them out in. We have a couple of different ways of stitching them together. We can either attach all the bases to the center hexagon, so just, you know, the base of this one to the center, and then the base of this one to the center, and then join the sides together. And I have done that, I think, when I did the hexagon flower video, because it's quick and easy to join the sides once you've got all the bases on. So that's one option. Another option would be to join these together. So join them in that seam together, and then join these 3 together side by side, and then join those 2 together side by side, and then join the rows together. And that's what I think we might do for this example, because it's different to what we've done before. So what I've given you then is a sample of Wonderfil 80 weight thread, which is what I would use for English paper piecing and applique. It's a great little thread. It helps to make my stitches a bit less visible. And I've also given you a size 10 applique needle. What I'll get you to do is to cut a length of thread from your fingertip to your elbow, because that's as long as, you know, it makes it easier for you to stitch if your thread length is only the distance of your fingertip to your elbow. And you'll need a decent knot in the bottom. Also giving you a quilter's clip, and I've done that because when we put these two pieces together like that, if we hold them with our clip, it will help to take a lot of pressure off your fingers so you're not gripping them to death. The other thing that I use that for is a little reminder to me. I put it on the opposite side to where I'm going to be stitching. So I'm going to stitch that seam there. So I put my clip on the other side. So with my needle and thread then, what I'm going to be doing is called a whip stitch. And I'll be stitching along from these 2 points that meet. So I've got my pieces with their right sides together. I'll be stitching along from this point to that point there. And I'm going to start by putting my needle up through the fold, just like that. So with my needle going up underneath the fold so that my knot will sit in underneath it, then you'll notice that I've pulled my needle up just a little bit ahead of the points. So what I'm going to do is come back into that point there then, and I'm going to just put a knot through there. And because I've come back and I'm going to stitch over where I started from, that will give it a little bit extra strength. Now, if you've done any paper piecing with the cards, you'll know already that when you're stitching, you're actually stitching between the outside edge of your fabric and your card. There is room for you to be able to put your needle in that gap, and as I said, that's when we're using the quilting cotton and we've folded it over the card. There's a little gap. Now, because your Liberty Lawn is so fine and your paper is so fine, your fusible paper here, you don't have that gap, so you're going to need to stitch through the paper. Where you're aiming to stitch is the second thread in from the top. So stitching through your fabric and your paper, but it's still a whip stitch. So we're just going over in exactly the same way that we did it with the reusable papers, but we won't have the edge of the paper to guide us, so we just need to take that little bit extra time and care. Just try and keep that to the second thread down from the top so that our stitches still end up being in a nice straight line, and not too far apart, but the stitches are definitely not on top of each other. And as you pull your thread through, just give it a gentle tug so that the thread will sit down nicely in amongst the threads of your fabric. When you get to the point at the other end, putting an extra knot through there again, a couple times through the loop, so that will secure it for you. And when you open it up, what you're looking for is not to be able to see the daylight through, but that your stitches are nice and secure. So I'll cut that off then. So at the point then that you've got your little pairs, and then your group of 3, their side seams stitched together, and another 2. We're going to join them together, those rows together, because if you're making something bigger like a pouch or even a quilt, big lot, you would do it in rows in this way. So you would have rows that you joined all the sides together. So as I mentioned earlier, because we're just going to make a flower, we could have started with the center one and joined all the bases, and we would have ended up with the same shape then, like that. But we'll try something different this time. So what we're going to do then is join it in a zigzag. So down, and up that way. So we need to fold this pink hexie over the top of the cream one there, matching up your points and stitching in the same way that we did before, then starting at those top points, coming back and stitching right into that point. Now, I did show you earlier how to put your needle through the loop to do a knot there. Another way to knot your ends is called a lingerie knot, and we're just doing like a figure 8 with our thread. So if we take this thread from the right side, pass it underneath like that, then take the thread from the left side and bring it underneath the front, and to a figure 8, and then we'll just pull that needle through and add a nice secure knot there. So in the same way that we stitch those sides together, we're just going to be going across that seam, 2 threads down and pulling our thread as we go to keep it nice and tight. And when we come up close to that corner, making sure that your points are aligned there. Every time I come to an intersection, I like to put my needle back through the loop again to make another knot, just to make sure that it's nice and secure where the pieces all join together. If I end up having to take one out later on, it makes it easier if I've got those knots, stops everything unraveling. And so once I finished that first seam, I just fold it in the opposite direction, and I'll pop my clip on to hold it. I'm just going to work my way, again lining up the points so that they all meet, and because I'm starting a new section, again I'll go back through the loop at the start of this one to make another knot. So beginning and end of each section, knot him off, and then we'll continue to go through. So once I've got those joined together, then I'll add the bottom in the same way. So just coming up to the end of that last seam then, and I'll finish that off, and I'll put that same lingerie knot, you might have heard it called a knicker knot, in that final corner. So bringing the thread from the right underneath and crossing to the left, and then the thread that's coming out on the left hand side underneath there. So you've got a figure 8 and pull your needle out through the, pulling it nice and tightly to finish off. I'll snip that off and going to give it a press now, because it will be a little bit wanting to bend where I've folded it and held it. So I'll just give it a press. Remember, no water in your iron, because we don't want to don't want those papers to start to dissolve. So I'm just giving it a press, and I'll press the background fabric while I'm here. What I'm going to do is fold that background fabric in half to find the center point. Okay. Now, with our needle book, normally I would say find your center spot, and the reason why I've only pressed it in half lengthwise is because we're going to be writing our script, our words at the top, but we still need to leave not only the seam allowance at the bottom, but just a little bit. So I'll probably come up from the bottom, probably come up half an inch before I've put my flower on, but I still want it to be centered across the middle there. So it's completely up to you which way round you go. You could put in this way, lining up those center seams with your fold on your fabric, but we just need to bring it down. So we've left the room at the top. Remembering to leave your seam allowance, your 1/4 inch on either side, but if you've got that center seam lined up with the fold that you put in your background fabric, you'll be right there. So I'm just going to use a few drops of Roxanne's basting glue on that. So when you use the glue, don't put it too close to the outside edge of your hexes, because you're going to be stitching there when you applique it on. Make sure that you're happy with the direction everything's going in, and that you've got everything lined up nice and straight. And that will dry itself, that glue, but if we just give it a press with the iron, it will set it for you, because the heat from the iron will set the glue. Now, of course, you could use pins for that job, but if you've got some basting glue, that will do it nicely without needing to catch yourself with the pins. So using the same needle and thread then that we used to stitch our hexes together, we're going to just use blind applique stitch to stitch the your hexagon flower down to your background. So coming up from the bottom, and as you come up from the bottom, you're going through the side of your hexagon flower. And then when you go back down, you'll go down on the outside. If you keep in mind that it's straight up, so coming up through the side of your flower and straight back down on the outside. And we're just going to do that all the way round. So up on the side, and straight back down the outside. Now, because we're going to be stitching nice and finely, it may be difficult to see your stitches on the top, but what you'll be able to do is turn your fabric over, and you'll be able to see on the back when you've gone all the way around your flower. Once you've finished that, then it's just a simple case of following the instructions to put together, whether it's your needle book or your lavender bag. But what you've done now is made your flower to go on the front using fusible papers. I do hope that you found that really useful. We have kits in a range of colours, and you'll find them on our website. If you need any other supplies, you'll find them there also, needles and thread and a whole range of things that you might find handy. Until next time, happy stitching. If you have any questions, don't hesitate to send me a message. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. Bye for now.